1.23 Part 1 Preparing for a Job Interview.
My name is Jeff Neal. I'm a career coach, and I help people discover the right career for them and then actually go get that job.
How important is the resume when you're applying for a job?
The resume is really important because it represents you. It's often the first presentation of your skills and abilities to an employer before they actually have a chance to talk with you.
What are some mistakes that people make with their resumes?
So some of the biggest mistakes that I've seen that people make on their resume is they include everything, right? As an employer, I don't care what you did 20 years ago or 30 years ago. You may have been a star at something that you did 25 years ago, but as an employer, I'm thinking, this has no relevancy to me. You've changed over 25 years. The world has changed over 25 years. So people include far too much information in their resumes. My recommendation is that they only go back about 15 years.
Are there any other mistakes?
Another completely unforgivable mistake is grammatical errors, bad punctuation, and spelling errors. When I see a resume that has, more than one error, it's done, right? We live in a world where resumes are expected to be perfect. So word processing has spell check on it. There's just no reason to have something misspelled.
How important is a candidate's social media presence?
Yeah, in today's world, almost all hiring managers and HR staff will look for you online before they interview you. So your online profile can actually either help you get an interview or it can stop you from getting an interview. So for your social media, you want to be really careful, particularly when you're looking for a job. You want to be really careful about what pictures you're showing and what conversations you're posting is public information. You also want to do a Google search on your own name.
Assuming a candidate gets an interview, how do you help them to prepare for it?
So the way I help candidates prepare for interviews is I have them take the job advertisement, right? They can get the job advertisement if it's posted online or a job description from the HR office, and to go through it and simply circle what are the skills and abilities that are required to do that kind of job. And to take an 8.5 sheet of paper and make 3 columns. And in the first column, list the key skills and abilities that are required to do that position. And then in the second column, list where they've used those skills and abilities in different roles in their career. And then in the third column, to actually create stories that demonstrate how they've used those skills in those different companies.
1.24 Part 2 On the day of the interview.
What tips can you give a candidate for the day itself? For example, how should people dress for an interview?
It's important to dress appropriately for an interview because if you're underdressed for an interview, it shows a lack of respect, right? Companies and employers are going to look at that and say, this person's not taking this interview seriously. So I encourage my clients to actually overdress a little bit for an interview. Now, how can you determine the best way to dress for an interview? You might actually get on a company's LinkedIn page and look at their LinkedIn photos because that'll give you a sense of that company's style. Are they all dressed in suits and they're really formal? Are they more relaxed? Another way outside of a big city is that you can often stake out the front door, a couple days ahead of time and see how employees are actually going into that office. How are they dressed?
Obviously, you shouldn't be late, but how early should you get there?
So you want to show up at an interview about 5 minutes early. If you get there earlier than that, just grab a cup of coffee in a nearby restaurant or shop. And that when you walk into the interview, you don't want to have your headphones on. You want to make sure your cell phone is turned off. You don't want to have any interruptions.
Do you have any other tips before the interview starts?
As soon as you walk into the building for a job interview, you've already begun the interview. The way that you greet people, the way that you greet the receptionist at the front desk and security, if there is security, all those people are part of the interview process because if you don't handle it in the right way, they may tell the person that you're interviewing with how you approach them and your chances of getting the job can actually be eliminated. So it's important that you treat everyone that you meet in the building as part of the interview process.
1.25 Part 3 During the interview itself.
Is it okay for a candidate to talk about money or salary during an interview?
It is okay for a candidate to talk about money and salary during an interview, but the real question is, when should they talk about money and salary? And the answer is late. One of the biggest mistakes that job candidates make is they focus too much on their own needs, right? So work-life balance is important, the number of hours I'm going to work, the amount of vacation I'm going to get, the pay and the benefits, they're all very important. But we have to understand that the employer is giving us money. What's most important is that I want to communicate that I can deliver enough value for this position that you offer me the job. Once an employer believes that I'm the right candidate and then they offer me the position, that's the right time to start talking about money and benefits. However, I wouldn't raise the topic. I would let the employer raise it first.
Do you have any other tips for candidates during the interview?
Body image and body language is really, really important in an interview. I can remember interviewing someone that was slouched back and they were down and their energy was really, really low. And it just communicated to me, this person doesn't really want this job. They didn't feel motivated. And I can remember talking with candidates who they're leaning forward and their voice is stronger. They're making a lot of eye contact directly with me. I can tell that they're really listening to what I'm saying. They're hearing what I'm saying, and that they want to learn about this job to help me understand their value. So body language and eye contact are really, really important. The tone of voice is also really, really important, because when we're unsure, we're less confident, we tend to not only slouch, but our voice goes down. And that's not communicating the confidence that you have, that you're confident in your skills and abilities.
And just to finish, did you ever ask extreme questions during interviews when you worked in HR?
As a director of HR, sometimes I would ask extreme questions, such as, if you could be any kind of tree in the world, what kind of tree would you want to be? Because I want to see what it reveals about someone's personality.
What would a good answer be?
So one good answer could be, I'd like to be an oak tree, because it's strong and it's steady. Another good answer could be, I'd like to be an apple tree, because it's beautiful when it's blooming and it gives fruit to people that they would enjoy. Another answer could be, I'd like to be a cactus, because cactuses don't need a lot of support and they're very, very persistent. They can survive.
1.26. Interview with a career counselor. Looking at language. 1.
So some of the biggest mistakes that I've seen that people make on their resume is they include everything.
2.
As an employer, I don't care what you did 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
3.
You also want to do a Google search on your own name.
4.
Take an 8.5 sheet of paper and make 3 columns.
5.
You want to make sure your cell phone is turned off.
6.
They're making a lot of eye contact directly with me.
1.27. On the street. Janine.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
The last time I had an interview for a job was in 2011.
How did you prepare for the interview?
I took a lot of rescue remedy to help with the nerves, and I just practiced every question that they could ask me in my head.
Did the interview go well?
No, it didn't. I didn't get the job.
Joe.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
About 2 months ago.
How did you prepare for the interview?
Well, I looked at the job description and thought about my experience and then tried to match my experience to the various different points on the job interview.
Did the interview go well?
It did,
How do you know it went well?
because they offered me the job.
Ivan.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
I last had an interview for a job a few weeks ago. That's the last time I had an interview for a job.
How did you prepare for the interview?
To prepare for the job interview, I read about the company and learned about what they did and to see if I liked the work that they did.
How do you know it went well?
I think it went well because they followed up with an email to talk about further opportunities at that company.
Yasuko.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
The last interview that I had was for my current company that I work for, and that was about 2 years ago.
How did you prepare for the interview?
I prepared for the interview by doing a little research on the company, the kind of products that they make, their philosophy, the history and their background of the company.
Did the interview go well?
I think that the interview went well because it was actually a long interview. I had a lot of good conversation with the managers there, and I also got a few more interviews afterwards and eventually got the job, so the interviews went well.
Used.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
About 3 months ago.
How did you prepare for the interview?
I read about the company and I knew what the job contents was, and I knew everything that I had to know for the interview and was well prepared to answer their questions.
Did the interview go well?
It went well. In the end, they said I was too young, so they didn't hire me, but they would have if I was older, they said.
1.28 Colloquial English phrases. 1.
I just practiced every question that they could ask me in my head.
2.
And then tried to match my experience to the various different points on the job interview.
3.
I think it went well because they followed up with an email.
4.
Their philosophy, the history and their background of the company.
5.
In the end, they said I was too young, so they didn't hire me.